Welcome to Complete BS, the official podcast of couch coaches everywhere. Not just football. It's every sport that ruins your parlay, wrecks your fantasy week, and still brings you back for more. Buzzer beaters, blown leads, and brackets and flames. Yeah, we're all over it. Unfiltered takes, armchair analysis, and enough bold opinions to fill a playbook. Hosted by Brian Schmuck, sports junkie, the Saban of stats, and your official voice of I could coach better than that. Let's go.
Couch Coach Nation, to take a line from the NCAA basketball tournament, we are down to the Final Four. The quarterfinal games gave us one game decided by less than 10 points, and two of the games were total blowouts. Miami was more physical than Ohio State, Indiana dominated Alabama, and Oregon shut out Texas Tech. Thank goodness for Ole Miss and Georgia, who turned in what is likely the game of the year, at least so far. I was really shocked by the poor performances by Ohio State and Texas Tech. Not only did I think that they would win, but I never would have guessed that they would have been dominated the way that they were. AV, any reaction to the four quarterfinal games?
Yeah, I thought that Miami and Ohio State was a tight game. At least it was still in question in the fourth quarter, but Miami was kind of in charge of that the whole way. And so there wasn't a ton of drama until Ohio State pulled within a score late, and then they couldn't stop Miami. The next two games were kind of duds, just one-sided, not a whole lot of fun to watch for the average fan. And then, like you said, Georgia and Ole Miss had the game of the year, really entertaining, back and forth, good plays on offense and defense. It's interesting that they don't like blowouts when it's G5 teams, but there's still blowouts. That's always going to happen. You're never going to get around that. So as a fan, I learned to take the good and the bad. I think it was a great weekend of football because of the stakes, even if the games weren't all edge of your seat barn burners. I still enjoyed it.
And, James Madison played Oregon closer thanks to their late fourth quarter run. But if you're just looking by the total score points, JMU played the game a little bit closer than Texas Tech did. So like you said, blowouts are always going to happen. It's not an argument to keep the G5 out, but we'll talk more about the ways that we would maybe change it in the offseason. Normally we give out our game balls separately, but since there were only 4 games, we came together on game balls. And so for the Cotton Bowl, the game ball goes to Keionte Scott with his 72-yard interception return for a touchdown that gave the Canes a 14-0 lead going into halftime, and they never looked back. The Orange Bowl, we've got Mateo Uiagalelei for his strip sack, fumble recovery, and return to the 6-yard line. This game was 6-0 when this happened, and it set up Oregon for their first touchdown of the game to make it 13-0, and it took all the wind out of the Texas Tech sails. The Rose Bowl, we're going with the Indiana defensive coordinator Brien Haynes. Alabama had been one-dimensional all year with an ineffective ground game, so he knew that they would have to focus on stopping Ty Simpson in the passing game. When Simpson left the game, he had 67 yards passing. Alabama was held to 3 points, under 200 yards total offense, and 23 yards rushing. This was total domination, and it starts with the game plan that Brien Haynes had for his unit. And then the Sugar Bowl, we're going with our only offensive player, and it's obvious. Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss. He was 30 of 46 for 362 yards, 2 touchdowns. He kept plays alive with his scrambling ability, and anytime you thought Ole Miss was down or maybe Georgia was getting back into it, Georgia was going to extend the lead, he did something and pushed Ole Miss forward. He carried them to the win. AV, any thoughts on these game balls?
I'll start with Keionte Scott. The game ball well-deserved. He had the play of the game. They probably won them the game, if we're being honest. But on top of that, he's a good ball player, man. He's a difference maker in that defense, and I think their 2 losses, I can't exactly remember if he missed both of them, but he at least missed one of them. I think he makes a huge difference for that Miami defense and somebody that could make his mark in any game. And then Trinidad Chambliss, I think he had the performance of the weekend. He just made things out of nothing quite a few times that extended drives or even scored points, and that's something to look forward to on these next couple of games and see if he becomes the difference maker in that way as well.
When we move on to the semifinals, we're going to start in the Fiesta Bowl, Miami versus Ole Miss. Miami's a 3.5-point favorite, even though they're the lower-seeded team. With all the success Miami's had in their history, they've never won at the Fiesta Bowl. They're 0-4. They played in 2 pretty famous Fiesta Bowl games in 2003 when they lost a double overtime national championship game against Ohio State. And then back in 1987, the 86 season, they got off the plane in Army fatigues legs for a number 1 versus number 2 showdown with Penn State and lost. They need to win this Fiesta Bowl to get to the national championship game. Ole Miss, they're uncertain with which coaches are going to be there for them. Several of the offensive coaches are part of Lane Kiffin's staff at LSU, and LSU's been receiving transfer visits, and these coaches are in Baton Rouge, part of recruiting. Ole Miss's Pete Golding has downplayed this in saying that, quote, we're filled with elite coaches everywhere. So he doesn't think that the coaches being missed, if they even come back for this game this week, are going to matter. This is either going to be a distraction for Ole Miss or something that the players are going to rally around. The Georgia defense that they just beat is every bit as good as what they're going to see from Miami. So I don't think the Ole Miss game plan should change much. As Chambliss and Kewan Lacey go, so will the Rebels. For Miami, they need to run the ball with Mark Fletcher and keep Chambliss on the sidelines. Winning time of possession and letting your defense work has been the recipe for them in big games. The Ole Miss defense isn't as good as what they faced versus Ohio State. It's much closer to Texas A&M's defense, statistically speaking at least. But Miami, they're hitting on all cylinders right now. Mario Cristobal, he's pulling all the right strings. Just like Ole Miss will look to have a similar game plan as they did against Georgia, I think Miami should have a similar game plan as they did against Texas A&M and how they were able to contain Marcel Reed and all the weapons that the Aggies have. AV, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, that's a really good breakdown right there, B. It's interesting the time we live in college football where teams are in the playoffs and their coaches are recruiting for other schools. I don't know how it can't be a distraction. However, there have been times this year where I've picked against teams because the coach was fired or the uncertainty in the program, and it just doesn't seem to matter sometimes. And so I don't know how to weigh that, to be honest with you. It has to matter on some level, but I don't know how much. Miami, to me, looks like the best team left in the field, looks like the best team in the country. I've said that about 5 different teams this year, and they all kind of turn around and lose. So I don't know that matters how you look week over week. It just matters with the matchup, right? So one of the things about the first 2 games that Miami played in the playoffs were the offenses that they played against struggled to score. And that kept the game close, allowed their defense to eat. And then in the fourth quarter, Mark Fletcher got going, and they ran away with it. So I think Trinidad, Chambliss, and Ole Miss will score early, like maybe not the first drive, but like they'll score early and often and put some points on the board, which will then put a little pressure on the Miami offense that they haven't felt, in the postseason yet. And it'll be interesting to see how they respond with that. Will Carson Beck make a mistake and throw a turnover? I think in their 2 losses, he had 6 turnovers himself those games. So that could be the difference. Or will someone like Malachi Toney step up and make some plays, some explosive plays, and keep them in the game? So it's an interesting matchup. A lot going on off the field for Ole Miss. That being said, I'm going to go with the upset, and I'm going to take Ole Miss, mostly because they've done it without Lane Kiffin for a couple of games now and look good doing it, so I'm going to assume that they've got that part figured out. And Trinidad Chambliss has been unbelievably hard to stop. Miami's got a great defense. I mentioned Keionte Scott. He's just one of a handful of stars on that defense, but Trinidad Chambliss looks like he's ready for any challenge. So I'm going to take Ole Miss 35-24.
If this game is a shootout, if this is a high-scoring game, Miami can't win. Miami can't score point for point, touchdown for touchdown with Ole Miss. They've got to keep this game lower scoring as they have in their previous 2 playoff games. I think the coaching distraction finally catches up with Ole Miss, and the way that Miami defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman has his unit playing, I've got the Canes advancing to the national championship game 24-20. I think 28 points is the key for Ole Miss. If they get to 28, they're going to win. I don't see it happening. Canes move on to the national championship game. The Peach Bowl brings us a Big Ten rematch of Oregon versus Indiana. The Hoosiers won that game at Oregon by 10 points, and playing in Autzen Stadium is no easy task, so that was a very impressive win for Indiana, but the game was 20-20 with under 7 minutes to play, and Indiana scored the final 10 points, so it was a really close game until just the very end. This game features what could be the top 2 quarterbacks taken in the NFL, with Fernando Mendoza from Indiana and Dante Moore from Oregon. Oregon, like Ole Miss, is having to juggle some coaching staff instability in that both Oregon's offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator have taken head jobs and are staying with Oregon through their run, but they've both been on site at Kentucky and at Cal for their new jobs receiving transfer portal visits. So a lot going on there with some instability in who's actually there running practices from the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator side of things. AV, where are you going in this game?
What I have to work with is the first time that they met. Like you said, it was a close game until late, and then Indiana pulled away. But that game was at Oregon. Neither team had a lot of yards. Indiana forced them into some turnovers, which gave them short field and stuff like that. But Indiana went into Oregon and won by 10. That's the bottom line. Now they're on a neutral field. Dante Moore has grown since then. I think he's gotten better every week. But unfortunately, I think Indiana's gotten better since then also, and they've gotten more confident. But they were probably going into Oregon as this is the biggest game of the year. And since then, they've beat Ohio State. They beat Alabama. They know they can win, and there's a lot to be said for that. In close matchups like this, I tend to look at the coaches as well. And 9 out of 10 times, I think Dan Lanning is the guy that gives this team the emotional edge and pushes them over the top if there's a close game. And he does that a lot. But I don't think he beats Cignetti in that. Like, Cignetti gets his team to believe they can beat anybody at any time. So there's a flip of the coin. So all that said, I'm going to go based on, I think Indiana's the slightly better team operating at a higher efficiency. They look like a well-oiled machine. They've got the confidence. They've beaten Oregon once. Cignetti's just as good or a better coach at Lanning as far as the motivational and that kind of thing. You mentioned the stability. All that together, I'm going to go Indiana 35, Oregon 28.
You mentioned it, and I've seen other people saying it, that Oregon has gotten better every week since that Indiana game. But keep in mind, since the Indiana game, they've beat Rutgers, Wisconsin, Iowa by 2, Minnesota, Southern Cal, Washington, and now James Madison and Texas Tech in the playoffs. That's not exactly a grind, and I'm sure others are going to point to, what about Indiana's schedule? It hasn't been terribly difficult either, but wins over Ohio State and Alabama are better than what I've seen out of Oregon. And also, too, there's something to be said for that blue blood status and that marquee name of beating Ohio State and Alabama, two traditional powers for the last 70 years in college football. Indiana's not afraid of anybody or any team. They've gone up against the historic best, and they beat the defending national champions. I think Indiana is a machine right now. I love everything that they're doing on both sides of the ball. I've got the Hoosiers winning by 14, 38-24. With only 2 games this week, AV, give me a pick for the book club.
Well, it's the one we just talked about. I'm going to take Indiana minus 4.5. I think they win by a touchdown. They won by 10 earlier this season at Oregon. Yes, that wasn't a clean game. It took some turnovers and some things like that, but that's what Indiana does. They create turnovers. They capitalize. Any mistake you make, they will make you pay. So I'm going to go with Indiana minus 4.
I like that pick. I've got Indiana winning this game by 14. I think that line is really low, and I'd be very confident with Indiana covering a 4-point game. My bonus pick is the Miami Ole Miss under 52.5. The most points the Miami defense has given up all season is 26 on the road to SMU. Since then, they've given up a total of 58 points in 6 games, only 17 of those in the playoffs to Texas A&M and Georgia combined. I see this game being in the low 20s. I said 24-20 Miami would win. That's a total of 44 points. That gives me 8 points to play with. If something goes awry, I like the under 52.5 as my bonus play. Join us at CouchCoachNation.com, and you can follow the Complete BS Pod on X and Instagram. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to Complete BS. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us online. And tell us what you think of this episode. Use hashtag CouchCoachNation, and let's keep the conversation going.